Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming back. This is going to be really exciting. We've got some great input here from industry and from academia to be able to help guide you in your careers and your futures, and have just a general discussion about how industry and schools can work together in a better way and help move forward the skills growth in this industry. So I'm going to hand it over to Deb. She will be in charge of what's happening here, and let's have a great discussion.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name's Debra Isaac, and I'm the founder of Houdini.School, and I also teach Houdini at UCLA. We're going to be talking about a bunch of topics that I'm pretty passionate about. First, I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves and explain how they got to where they are today. Go ahead.
Hi there. Well, that's a dangerous question to ask. My name is Nelson Lim, and I'm currently teaching as a professor at the University of Texas at Dallas. So any UTD students here? Yay, okay, some. So how did I get started in the industry? I've always loved art and technology, loved to draw, and I love computer games. And when I figured out people pay people to do this stuff, I signed on, as I suspect many of you in the same boat. So I those were back in the days before there was any sort of great programs like what we have at UT Dallas or Texas A&M and all. And so, everyone said, you want to be a game programmer? Go study computer science. So that was what I did. I studied computer science at the National University of Singapore. And from there on, I applied. I was very fortunate. I got into Lucasfilm animation, and eventually I wore many hats across my career, starting off as a software engineer there, and then a pipeline engineer, and then eventually I became a technical director. I became an effects artist, and then as the story went along, I've done effects lead, supervision, all that kind of stuff, and now I'm teaching. So that's kind of my story. Try not to be too long. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Bailey Currie. I have a similar story. I feel like I'm on the very beginning of your trajectory. I went to Texas A&M. Actually started at UT Dallas. I was there for a year, a beautiful campus. So UT Dallas, Texas A&M, both wonderful schools for studying art and technology. After my undergraduate studying animation, game design, I decided I had no clue still what I wanted to specialize in. And so I went ahead and I knew I also was passionate about teaching and would love to someday in the future have the opportunity to teach at the graduate level. And so I went on to grad school at Texas A&M. And there I actually found my passion, which was procedural modeling and visual effects. And that was 7 years ago whenever I was introduced to Houdini. And it has been an awesome tool. I talk about it all the time. I'm all praise be. Houdini's amazing. My coworkers are always so annoying because they're like, oh, I could do that in Houdini. And yeah, they hear that from me all the time. So yes, and now in my, I guess, serious games career is what I would call it. I first started with a short 2-month contract working at Rooster Teeth, creating visual effects, which was super fun. Worked on RWBY and Genlock. But that was a very short time, and I learned so much in that first 2 months of working. And then before I even finished my contract, another company reached out to me. Somebody I used to work with or used to go to school with recommended me, and he went on to EA, and I filled in his spot at Cubic. It's a company that is based in Austin. I'm not sure if they're around anymore, but I was working remotely anyway, so you guys can also apply there. But I guess that was where I was working on simulations for the military and where our stories kind of overlap, you'll hear. And now I worked there for 3 years, and starting this year, I started working at a company called IKIN, where we are exploring 3D holographic technology. So they are a new startup, about 5 years old now, and it's been amazing, really getting to use Houdini in all of my jobs. So I'll pass it over to Monica.
Hello, I'm Monica Garza. I have a very similar story to Bailey. I transferred to Texas A&M undergrad, kind of not really knowing what I wanted to do, definitely geared a lot more towards animation, and then I went to grad school, and we actually took a course together over the summer, learning a lot from industry professionals at DreamWorks. And that's kind of where we were introduced to Houdini, and how amazing it is to create so many things so quickly. And then that's where I decided that's what I wanted to do, was be a tech artist. And Bailey recommended me to go with her to Cubic, where we worked on a pipeline basically from the ground up, building ways to create this military sim for our company. And since then, I also worked there for 3 years, but now I've moved on to Daybreak, working at Dimensional Inc., working on DCUO. And I help a lot of the character artists kind of with their tools and maximizing efficiency. So I like to work a lot more with like behind the scenes kind of pipeline stuff. So yeah.
Thank you so much. My first question is actually for Monica and Bailey. How do you think, how are the needs of the industry changing? What should students now, as they're graduating, be prepared for?
Technology is advancing. I think you got a little bit of that from the UE5 presentation that was just given. It's real time, and it's becoming more accessible to more indie developers. So you can't just make a pretty game anymore. It also has to be really fun. So anybody can make a pretty game now. You go to the asset store and download whatever you want, right? So figuring out new ways to combine those different assets, remix it, make it fun, is what's really going to set artists apart now. Also, I work at a 3D hologram company. I never thought I would say that. I generate the content for 3D holograms. So there are so many different things that you have to consider when you're creating content in an environment that reacts with real life. And I think that's something that we're going to see more and more, where the line between our reality and our digital world is going to blur. We're going to see more of 3D scanning, right? Bringing our real world objects into the internet. Maybe we're going to have more virtual showrooms and 3D things happening, mobile apps that interact with our environments. I loved the picture that he showed with the concert, where was like this interactive light show. I would love the opportunity to work on something at that scale in the future. So I think that is how the industry is going. We're more technology. So
Exciting.
I think it's definitely trending towards more procedural needs. I've been talked to by some recruiters, and a lot of what they're asking for, I think, is a case-by-case basis on what they need. There's all different sorts of things out there that they need specialists or generalists for characters, for animation. So it's like there's a huge scope of things that are needed right now in the games industry. But to piggyback off of what Bailey was saying, I have a story about how I went to the dentist, and they did like photogrammetry of my teeth, which was so cool. So it's like these things can apply not only just to games, but literally anything now because of how much technology is advancing.
That's great. Thank you. Next question for Nelson. How do you calm the fears of the new student learning Houdini? Because people are intimidated by the learning curve, and how do you help them cope with that?
I don't.
You throw them in the fire.
I think it's all mindset, really. At the end of the day, it's all mindset. Whatever it is, just imagine the time like before you even opened up Unreal Engine or before you opened up Unity, everything felt like it was so far away, so overwhelming. And even as, experienced CG practitioners, we still feel that very much, like when something new comes up and like Houdini has some other new piece of tech, a new feature coming up, it's like, oh, it's so overwhelming to just, try to learn that and all. And I typically try to introduce my students this way to things. Like, first of all, think of something interesting that you want to do with it. Like, what is something that motivates you and is cool to do? So even in my classes, I try to give them the creative freedom to define a project. And it's not just a exercise of this is how you use the nodes, but give them something like a creative result at the end of the day. And then try to structure your learning around that. You will never learn everything. And I always tell my students, because every student who comes to me either wants to be a Houdini master, a Maya master, an Unreal Engine master, and I say that, you know what, you want to know the truth? The truth is nobody is really a whatever master, because these tools are so deep and the techniques involved in CG are so deep and it's evolving all the time. The moment you feel like you mastered something, it's guess what? It's a little bit outdated already. So don't feel that overwhelmed. Just really start to understand yourself, what gives you joy, what motivates you, and structure tiny projects to do it. And don't get caught up too long at doing those stuff. 2 weeks. Set yourself 2 weeks with a cool idea that motivates you, and just do it. At the end of 2 weeks, if it looks like crap, it's okay. Move on to the next thing. Yeah. And if it doesn't, great, put it in your portfolio. So that's the way I would say that. There's really nothing that's too difficult. It's just all in the mind. So don't let yourself get yourself get in the way of yourself, basically.
Get in your own way.
Get in your own way, yeah, that's right.
And I love that motto, fail faster. I think you hear that a lot in games, less in film, but I think that's a wonderful motto, fail fast, right? And how do you stay inclusive for all kinds of artists, the tech artists and the less tech artists? Because a lot of people, they ask me, don't I need to code to learn Houdini, to use Houdini? And as much as that is, available to people, you don't have to code to use Houdini. Do you find that you have to talk to different types of students about that?
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception that you need to code to learn Houdini. Yeah. To some extent, it is true, but I think Houdini poses it in a very, it hides a lot of that in terms of like, I'm actually teaching you how to code if you learn how to use the 4 nodes to loop, but actually it doesn't feel like you're coding. So we're teaching you the principles of in fact, I think the word procedural is pretty much coding, programming. So there's a lot of these sort of things there, but it's just the principles of what is coding. It's just learning to give instructions. And that's what proceduralism is, learning to give instructions. And I think it's in Houdini, I tell the students, you don't have to touch code at all. There are lots of nodes that basically do them. You don't even need to know math, right?
Right.
There's lots of nodes that do the math for you. You just need to know what is the result that you want.
And how to solve the problem.
Exactly. You want to calculate velocity? Well, there's a node that calculates velocity for you. You just know that you need to get velocity or something like that. So I try to introduce students, first of all, by just introducing them to all of the nodes that they can use. Like in my classes, I typically say, hey, check out the attributes node. Every single attribute node can do everything that you want to do without ever touching VAX or even VOPs. And occasionally when I introduce them to like a wrangle node, it's because I say, I tell you, 99% of the time when I'm using a wrangle node, it's just to declare an attribute because it's faster. That's all. Which, a lot of people like that. That's a bad use of a wrangle node. But yeah, if you look at my node networks, 99% of my wrangle nodes is just declaring an attribute. So yeah, I mean, just really, there really isn't that much of a fear in terms of programming. And I also tell them that in the industry, there's also a spectrum of artists who use Houdini. I know of people I've worked under who are my leads who will not consider themselves a coder at all, never touched code at all. But when Houdini was introduced into the studio, they kind of just pick up a little bit of what they need to know.
Right.
They're not strong coders at all, but they are leads, and they just and they still can do fantastic stuff with Houdini without being like a really technical person. In fact, sometimes being excessively technical again gets in your own way because again there's a spectrum of artists, and so some of the best ones are the ones who are artistic and they know the end artistic result they want to get to, and the tech stuff is I'll do whatever I need to do to get there. And then the other spectrum is the really technical artists like me who, oh no, I need to solve this in the most scalable way, and I spend way too much time without actually achieving the artistic result that is really more important.
Right.
So,
thank you for that. Next question is for Monica and Bailey. How should students represent themselves in terms of being a generalist or a specialist?
I have heard that having only worked at smaller studios, I can give my experience from that perspective. We are definitely looking for generalists. I think larger studios can have the budget to afford a specialist in every area, but still would like someone who has knowledge of other areas of the pipeline. So I think being a generalist helps you in both contexts, but that would be my advice. If you're looking to go to a smaller studio, you need to be a generalist. You have to wear multiple hats. You have to be able to communicate with other departments and have them trust you because you know what they're doing. But if you're going to a larger studio, then I think specializing and really focusing in on one major and maybe having a couple of minors is better.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Also coming from a smaller studio, I believe being a generalist is a lot more helpful because of budget reasons. However, I think as a junior tech artist, or like if you're just coming into the industry, a lot of your experience in the industry is going to help you kind of decide if you want to become a specialist, and kind of helps you kind of pinpoint what you're most interested in. And I think it's always good to have something that you're very passionate about, that you want to look into outside of school or work, just to kind of get more info and more knowledge on, like maybe you really like rigging and you want to know how to procedurally rig things and stuff like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can only look for rigging tech jobs, but it's cool to have something that you're very passionate about, I think.
Thank you. And also, what are the most important traits you would say in a junior effects or a junior artist coming in? Technical ability, artistic eye, team can-do attitude.
I think a willingness to learn is a good one.
Yeah.
You touched on it a lot. It is really important with technology advancing so quickly that you are able to be bad at something and be okay with that. Like, you're gonna start, you're gonna be bad. It's gonna be okay, you're gonna get through it. So you have to accept that and be willing to learn. We don't expect you to know everything. We do expect you to Google things all the time. Whenever I first started at Rooster Teeth, I remember being terrified that someone was gonna look over my shoulder and see me Googling like how to do some visual effect. So it's okay. It's okay to Google. I think school helps teach you know what to Google, and you can find things a lot quicker than people that don't have that education background that you do. If I'm speaking to this crowd over here. Yeah. So yeah, a willingness to learn, and don't get stuck. And if you are stuck, speak up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you time box it, we say that a lot. It's a work jargon phrase thing that we say all the time, but just attack a problem for however many days, and then if you're not making any progress, you need to speak up and let your supervisor know so that they can help you or point you in the right direction. The worst thing is for you to be struggling and no one know about it. So it's okay not to know everything, and it's okay to speak up about not knowing everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the ability to self-motivate is also a really key thing, to want to learn more about what you're working on, to Google things, figure out ways to make things more efficient, and to, not be afraid to ask questions, to ask for help, and be interested in learning about the project as a whole, to kind of know the ins and outs of everything that you're working on, not necessarily even just as a generalist, but even if you're going to be a specialist, it's good to know how your work affects other people's work. I think that's very important.
I think ultimately, at the end of the day, as someone who has hired a lot of junior artists, we are really looking for potential. We're not looking at, well, unless you're trying to apply to be a modeler at ILM, then we're looking at your portfolio and going like, okay, can you produce that work that we need you to produce day one when we put you in that seat as a junior artist? But in most cases, we're looking for potential. So when it comes down to potential, the first question is, are you really passionate about this industry? If I bring you in and I invest my time or my lead's time into you, will you be gone 1 year from now? Like completely disappear out the industry and decide that you want to do something else with your life. So you have to show that passion, and not just, I graduated with a degree in a similar field. That may be the case with engineers, that may be the case with architects or whatever, but that's not the case in this industry. So passion is number one. And then number two, I think it kind of dovetails to it, is what you guys have said. Like, do you, like outside of course exercises, do you invest in exploring different things? Do you try to release your own indie game in Steam, even if no one buys it, or even if it's free and no one downloads it? But have you gone through that process yourself? Are you someone who is a self-starter, who is naturally curious? Because all of these indicate potential for you to learn, for you to grow, and that's all that we are really looking for. And then I would say the last thing is, do you in general show that you sort of know yourself or the industry, right? So if you're applying for a games job, but everything you're showing them, it has nothing to do with games at all, that can be a question. You're applying for an effects role, but you're showing all of your modeling work. It just means that it's, again, back to the question of passion. Are you passionate about the industry enough to just do some of your basic research and figure out what does each role actually do?
Great. What advice would you give to the student graduating in terms of lack of early success in getting a job? Like they're getting rejected all over the place and feeling really down about it.
It's okay. You're going to get through it. I think you get used to it, I guess. It's disappointing whenever you get those calls back, but you need to, it's good practice. Every opportunity, every interview, every time you get to show your work, it's good practice. So even if you don't get it, look at it that way. I would say to work on your reel, your portfolio, and your resume, and your network. So reach out to those that you know that already have jobs and see how they did it. I also would strongly encourage continuing your education. So whether you can afford to go to a master's program or enroll in an online course, continue your education, continue making projects. Don't just stick with the same. It's insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So what you need to do is build that reel better.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to keep in contact with your fellow students, to build that network, to go to things like this. This is a good thing to do. And also to realize that when you're going to interviews, and it's took me a while to kind of understand that you're also interviewing them. It's really easy to be like, oh my gosh, I want a job so bad. I'll take anything. I don't care what they do. I don't care how they treat me. If I have to work like 80 plus hours, don't do that. You have to value yourself as a creative as well. And even if you don't have experience, you still have to want to be at the company that you're applying for, not just because it is in the game industry. Do you like what they do? Do you like the games they make? Do you play the games they make? That kind of stuff. And also, keeping up to date on latest and emerging software and technology. I got a lot of questions from recruiters if I'd seen anything about the new UE5 demos and the live streams and stuff like that. Like, they're really interested in knowing if you care about what you do. So, yeah.
I would relate to you a personal story of mine. When I was graduating, I really wanted to be in the games industry, so I applied to like several game studio, went through ridiculous programming tests about how to create a camera frustum in OpenGL, etc., and like burned several nights really just trying to do that. I'm like, okay, you expect, and they all came back and said no. Like, that's if they are kind enough. Most of them don't even get back to tell you no. And, applying for jobs is a numbers game. When you graduate, your job is to apply for jobs. So just treat that as your job. Don't take it too personally when people reject you, even though it does feel that way for sure, and I identify with that. And so, after applying for a long time, I saw an internship opportunity with Lucasfilm, and I applied for it. I thought, well, there's LucasArts in there. They do some games. I can get into the games industry that way. And when I was applying for that interview, the manager was basically trying to explain to me that what you're doing has nothing to do with games at all. He's trying to temper my expectations there. But I got in as a software engineer, intern, and what was I doing? I was developing web applications for them. And so something to kind of realize as well is that your into the industry does not have to be the thing necessarily that you studied for. Does it make sense? While I wanted to be a games developer, I entered into the studio leveraging my strength, which was that they would hire anyone who knows any sort of programming skills, and I was developing web apps for them. And then from there, once you're in the industry, you get to know people, you get to talk to people. So even if your skill is, I'm really good at Instagram, you can apply to be a social media intern or something like that. The ex-CEO of Lucasfilm entered Lucasfilm as a receptionist. That was her very first job as a receptionist, and she became the CEO of Lucasfilm. So really, I mean, in companies, there's so many ways to get in. I think the most important step is to just get one foot in the door, and then people can get to know you, you can get to know people, and then you can figure your way out from there. Yeah.
Thank you. Excuse me. I think we're going to open it up to student questions now. Sorry. Yes. Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for the panel? As they were saying, this is a great opportunity to network and meet people and discuss things, and
There must be some questions.
there we go.
Hello, Bailey. My name is Sage. I wanted to ask you some of the problems that you run into when designing some of your 3D holograms. You said that you had some.
That's a great question. I love that question. So something that we really struggle with is brightness. Like, we need something that's gonna be brighter than everything else in reality. So we really like crank up the bloom on a lot of our holograms, but it's not what you think. Like, it's not all just blue glowing things. It's multicolor. And I think we also have to really to exaggerate that it is a three-dimensional hologram. We need to be able to see both sides of it. We need to be able to see depth. So any scene that we can create that has depth, that has objects covering other objects, that whenever you turn your head to the side, it's revealed. These are things that are really important whenever you're designing holograms. Another thing is in our hardware, we try to steer clear of the edges of the composition because we don't want it to appear like it is a flat screen. We always want it to feel like a three-dimensional object floating there. So we, in all of our scenes, a trick that we do is we add a vignette to keep it from hitting that ugly corner. Black is invisible. So you have to keep that in mind whenever you're designing, say, a gorilla. You need to add that silver back in order to give it that contour so you can actually see it. So if I'm wearing a black shirt and I'm doing some augmented reality experience where I have the webcam footage in there, I need to keep in mind that my black shirt is going to go invisible.
So when you're creating holograms, I don't know what you've created a hologram for, but I assume they've been in like open spaces, right? Maybe?
It is actually, so we are creating holograms for a hardware that we are designing. We have two devices, one that is for a cellular device, so you plug it into a Samsung, and it's you can take it anywhere with you. You have kind of like this triangular prism. And then another, we also have a desktop version, which is a little larger. It's about this big. So we are designing software to show off that hardware. And creating augmented reality experiences in the holograms. So we all want to be Tony Stark, right? So we want to have voice commands, we want to do gestures, and we want to feel like we are really immersed in this futuristic world.
Thank you.
So my question was, you mentioned that when you're hiring juniors, you're looking for potential. So like, could you talk about like what that means, like potential?
Yeah, sure. At the end of the day, it's just potential for growth is what I mean. So potential that you would stay in the industry, potential that you are a bit of a self-starter, you're curious about what's going on in the industry. You're curious enough to explore things for yourself, try things for yourself. This industry is very much in particular a ever-evolving sort of changing industry that you kind of have to have that attitude of like you got to want to learn and always be interested in new stuff. I mean, not necessarily that you learn everything, but you can't be someone who go, I've spent 5 years learning Houdini. I think I'm good, I think I'm gonna get into a bit of a retirement mode and cruise along the way. And maybe that's possible if you're a watercolor artist and you've learned every single thing there is to do with water and color and canvas. But that's not the case when the tools are changing right under you all the time and techniques are changing. And not just techniques are changing, but your interest in old techniques, because old techniques become relevant now. Let me give you an example. Virtual production is nothing new. Virtual production with something behind the screen is something that Hollywood has been doing for a long time, even in black and white cinema. Like all those car chase scenes in black and white cinema is a projection going on behind. But now we figured out that we can do LED screens, right? And LED screens isn't a new thing either. We've been doing that in concerts for a long time. So what has changed? Because of real-time technology coming together plus LED screens, visual effects supervisors figured out, hey, let's combine what's happening in the game space, in the entertainment concert space, with what we are doing in the cinema space. And that all comes together now as an entire sort of all new subsection where VFX companies are spinning off subsidiary companies, and people who work in the concert industry are now like, oh, I now can work in the film industry because I know something about LED projection. So I think it's that combination. Are you interested? Are you always curious? Are you always ready to learn? That's potential.
I had a question about when do you know when your portfolio is ready? Because I feel like I'm always in this loop cycle of it's not good enough, it's not good enough. So when do you know when it's like it's ready and you can show it to companies and when you're going to apply?
That's a very hard question because I feel the same. I feel like my stuff is never ready. And I think constantly improving is important. And asking the opinions of peers is also important. Getting outside perspective is important. Knowing what projects should go first as opposed to what maybe shouldn't even be in your reel is important. But yeah, constantly improving is something that I think affects all of us. Like even if you're still in the industry and you want to find something new, just adding what you've been working on, stuff like that. Just, it almost feels like it's never ready. And I know that sounds like the worst answer, but asking other people for their opinion is, I think, very important.
If I can quickly answer that. I think the first thing as an artist and it's a mindset thing again. I always emphasize on mindset at the end of the day, is that you have to understand, I think there was a quote by someone famous, really, really famous, and I believe George Lucas quoted him as well, when he said that films are never finished, they are merely abandoned. Any art that you ever produce can always be better, because you will be a better human being, a better artist tomorrow than you are today. So never be afraid to put work in progress out there. And especially now in the way things are changing, artists no longer put stuff out when they're done in an exhibit. We want to see your work in progress. We want to see your skills, your difference. Who's that guy who sells tons of NFTs, like expensive? Beeple, yes. Beeple started the one, like every day an art piece. Go back to his very first, like chicken scratch drawings. I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm sure he would agree, compared to what he's doing right now. So don't be afraid to put that out there, Don't let perfection be in the way, because guess what? You'll never achieve that. Secondly, I would agree with them, like, put your work out there so that you can get critique and all. Join a community. For some of you, you already know who are my students. If you go to nelsonlim.com/Discord, I have a Discord community for tech artists and all, where I always encourage people, just post whatever you're doing. Even if you don't think it's great, get feedback. I love to give feedback to students over there, or anyone who wants to break into the industry. So join a community. It doesn't have to be mine. It can be the Houdini artists Discord channel or whatever. But post stuff up there and be a little bit thick-skinned. If you get feedback from industry professionals, really just correct it and move on. Don't be defensive about your work at all. Yeah.
And come to the real reviews today so we can give you feedback. Any other questions?
Hello, thank you for your talk. The question I have is that when you're selecting the candidates for being an employee, there must be something about them that they stand out, like this element, like maybe their style, the approach they're working, the quality, the quantity of work, like what matters the most because they stand out.
I think whenever I'm looking at portfolios, I'm looking to see if I can drag and drop their work into a project that I'm currently working on. So oftentimes I'm looking for a certain style for an upcoming project, and I have an idea in mind. So if you are interested in working at a company that creates realistic looking games, then on your reel, make sure that that is present. It's good to have some variety, but I think oftentimes I'm looking for more. At our company, we're looking for more a variety, but also a stylized design. So I would be looking for portfolios that portray that. So I would look at the work of the company that you are trying to apply to and match their style.
So my first question for you is, are you applying as a junior? As an intern. All right. So you have to realize that as an artist of different stage, we are looking at different things, and and depending on the company that you're applying for, they're looking for different things. So I really agree in terms of that. One of the things I think is really hard, and I perfectly understand, I wouldn't want to be a student today, is how there's so much free information and conflicting information out there. I'm going to throw you another piece of conflicting information, but take it as it is I'd say spend the time to niche down and know who you are and what you want as an artist. So just because everyone likes Pixar stylized animation stuff, and your instructor, and maybe I'm one of them, who gave you this, that you should have one stylized piece and one photoreal piece and one. What company are you applying for? If you're trying to apply for a visual effects company that does photoreal stuff and you like the photoreal stuff, then do that. At the end of the day, it's not quantity, it is quality as a junior. Quantity is going to come once you get in the industry. I need to know from day one, when I hire you as a junior, can you do the things that I would ask a junior to do? So I'll give you a more specific example. If you're trying to be an effects artist, I get tons of students who are interested to work on massive water simulations, building destructions, and all that. I say, that's great, you know, but most of the time, your reel is not going to hit the quality of what I see on screen. But guess what? As a lead, so think about it as a lead of whatever role you're applying for, what is the thing that I want to outsource and get off the plate and have as many shots of it done as much as possible? It's not glamorous, but guess what? Every artist has to do that. It's sparks. It's like plasma, lightning, electricity type stuff. It's dust, ground interaction stuff. So it's not glamorous, but it's the bread and butter of effects, right? And I want to see that stuff in a artist reel. I get very suspicious if I look at that and the only thing in there is this massive pyro explosion with destruction happening, because I'll be thinking, is this like from somebody's tutorial? You know, when I don't see the bread and butter stuff and I don't know if you can apply that. So bringing back to your situation, niche down, know what is it that it's okay to apply only to certain types of companies, and then figure out like what is the lead most wanting to sort of delegate down to junior artist role, and then create your portfolio piece to do just that. Don't create 2, 3, 4, 5. Even if you have one that exactly matches the quality that you see in their reels, I'm going to hire you immediately, because there's not enough artists in the industry to fill the role. And if you can do that, I'm going to hire you immediately.
More questions?
Because of Houdini's ability to sort of basically create a map of your workflow with the nodes, would you find it helpful if people submitted as part of their portfolio actual digital assets or scene files where you could see their thought process and actually see how they went through to create their work?
Yeah, I think if you're seeing your thought process is really important. That's personally, that's what I have in my portfolio, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on that. I have a PDF. It's not a reel. It's a PDF where I break down tools that I've made and I write about my thought process behind them. And I found that a lot of people are very appreciative of that, especially recruiters who maybe aren't so technical and they find that they can kind of understand what I'm doing. I think they really appreciated that, and that impressed them. So I think, yes, being able to show your thought process, your workflow is super important.
In my procedural assets on my reel, I will try to display it in a pretty way. I don't have a ton of just node networks like sliding up and down on my reel, but I do have these different parameters that I control, and I do a little wiggling, and then at the end I'll get that parameters in just the right spot to where it looks the best to me. But a little wiggle back and forth. The breakdown is really good to see your thought process and the versatility of maybe a tool that you're creating, or if you're doing visual effects, the breakdown of the layers is really great to see. But yeah, as far as a node network, how would you?
That's a good question. I'm very opinionated about this. So, which, first of all, have a website. Don't be a free Wix website. Have your name on it, nelsonlim.com, wherever you are.com, and post what you are doing every day, every other day, once a week in there. That's where I want to see your thought processes, your node networks. On your reel, just have your website there, and how can I contact you, your email. The moment I look at, the truth is your reel and your portfolio is the first thing that's going to determine whether I will take a second look or not, especially as a junior artist. So if your reel opens up the door, then I'll spend more time to look at your website and look at your thought processes. If your resume, if you put your lengthy explanations about all of that, the reality is I'm not going to read it. And I'm pretty sure most effects leads don't, because the reality is they got like a lot of applications going on. Another benefit of doing all of that thought processes and posting regularly, and then once you have that blog post, post it on the Reddit channel, post it on the Houdini Facebook channel, post all of that, just say, hey, just sharing what I did this week, is that you're going to naturally create serendipitous connections to other people who like effects leads, who are always on the lookout for really curious people with potential to hire. And you might even get, someone knocking on your door without applying for a job.
Don't be shy. Any other questions?
Nelson, this is for you. I know you've been talking a lot, but I do a lot of managing. I work for Starbucks, and I am also a filmmaker, and I manage crews. I wanted to ask you, in your career, as your experience with leading creative teams, what are some of the challenges, like common challenges that you might face when dealing with people, and how you might have overcome them?
I think when it comes to leading people, I think one of the early mistakes I made early on in my career is, especially when you're a new lead, is to be very controlling of the results, because you feel like you're ultimately responsible for the results. And I think that took away a lot of ownership and creativity from the people under me. Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, you have to, there's X number of jobs out there or tasks out there, and I think it's helpful to let people on the team kind of take ownership of that creativity by going, you know what, Nelson, I really like to get a shot at this particular piece of work, and if you think that that would be something that would be suitable for them, maybe it's about 20%, 30% above their current ability, I'd say give it to them, because they can prove you wrong. And especially if you only hire the people who are hungry and curious, guess what? They're going to rise above that and give you much more than what their current ability allows them to. It grows them. They feel creatively satisfied. And I think that's all. That's the most important thing is to really get them to have ownership and to have them rise above their own challenges, right? Because if you gave them the challenge, it's like, that's not my challenge, that's your challenge for me. There isn't as much motivation to rise above that. So that's what I'll say in terms of motivating creative teams. Communication and all that, that's probably a manager's job and all. But for creative satisfaction, I think that's been a big thing for me.
Also empowerment, too, as a manager. Any last questions? I think we're just about out of time. Okay. One more question. Anyone? Okay. I guess that concludes our panel. Thank you so much. This was fabulous.